Hey, everybody, welcome back to a bonus episode here of the Spartan Shadows podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Chris. I'm here with my co host, Emmett. And today we have a special guest with us to talk all things MSU hockey as the hockey season is underway officially, and we got a big matchup this weekend. So I'd like to thank MSU hockey savant Jeremy Dewar joining us. So, Jeremy, thanks for joining us, taking some time to talk some hockey.
No problem. Glad to be here, boys.
So it's finally hockey season, my favorite time of year. I know yours as well. Um, we we started the season off with a quick 2 wins against Lake Superior State last weekend before going into the big rematch against Boston College this upcoming weekend. How you feeling about the boys, and what are your thoughts on the big couple of games coming up this weekend?
I mean, as far as how I'm feeling, feel same way probably preseason, just as good. Nothing last weekend to shake the confidence at all. I thought they played. As you get the season going, you'll want to have a little bit more depth come through and roll more than just your first line pop in the first four goals of the weekend. But yeah, I think one thing that actually I was on some other shows and recapping the weekend. I didn't even think about it until honestly Wednesday was to put this in perspective. Football, you have a full fall camp and all this time up. Hockey practice with coaches began 4 days before Lake State, so they really don't get a lot of practice with their coaches before official season starts,
Right.
just because of the way the NCAA calendar works. So thinking of that, I even became more okay with how the weekend went. That's why a lot of teams honestly didn't play last weekend. They took the weekend off to do an exhibition or not play a game because they wanted to have more practice lead up into their first series. So for MSU, I thought they came out really good. And the hard part is BC is one of those teams that took the weekend off, so I have no idea how to feel about about them. They're loaded. It's going to be a top five matchup, and you know, I assume high scoring, and we'll just see. Hopefully, you pop more than they do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a little nervous about going against the BC squad again. Just a whole roster full of NHL level talent. Eventually, from the freshman class all the way up through, and they had a wagon last year and didn't lose a whole lot. So, um,
No,
so it's going to be a tough test. Thankfully, for me, and this is what I identified, I guess, as kind of an X factor for this weekend. Trey Augustine, when he's on, is one of the best goalies in the country, if not the best. So maybe he can get hot early and steal us a game or two. But should be a good couple of games, I think. Emmett, you got anything to start off with?
First off, I would like to thank MSU Athletics and Media Department for letting me have passes to Saturday's game. So I'm excited to get to cover my first event in Munn. Last time I got to be there to watch a game as a student was when I was a student. I think one of the Notre Dame series. So I'm really excited to get to have the press perspective to compare for all three now because I've also done basketball and football for Michigan State Athletics. So I'm excited about that. Like you guys have said, it's beginning of the season, so a lot more testing out than worrying, I would argue.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Let me see the next thing I had there. Just overall, kind of looking at the season, we can talk about BC a little bit more maybe, but later. But overall in the season, what do you think is going to be kind of some of the key contributors this year for those of us who don't watch hockey? They might be newer to some of the players on the team. MSU is loaded just as well. I mean, there's a reason we're number 4 going into the season. There's a lot of good talent on our roster too, but who are some of the guys that you're going to hear the name called quite a bit, or you expect big things out of here?
yeah. So we hit on a couple. Trey Augustine is probably going to be the headliner. It comes with one. He's that talented, and it helps when you're, you're from Michigan, you go to Michigan State, and you're drafted by the Red Wings. That's going to get you a little extra media because it just makes sense to cover that person. So
Yeah.
I think Trey's going to be probably one of the ones that's talked about a lot. Most personality on the team combined with skill will probably be Isaac Howard. He won't turn down a media interview, that's for sure. Not in a bad way at all. Like that kid's just electric. But he had a great weekend last weekend. Kind of had a up and down first 2 years of college. Got him out of the portal last year. It was a first round draft pick and really struggled at Minnesota Duluth his freshman year and got back together with Adam Nightingale. And I thought he was good last year, but he still couldn't quite get the goal scoring that he was accustomed to. And you saw it at the World Juniors. He was putting in a ton of goals, and then he comes back to MSU, and I think he had one or two after the World Junior the whole rest of the way of the season. So, for him, it's about getting consistency going, and I think that's what he had an NHL offer to go to Tampa and begin his pro career, but I think they probably also even told him in the negotiation, like, you got to find consistency if you want to be at this level. So I think that's the key for him. The new foreign name for everyone to learn. I know everyone learned Artie Levshinov last year, who ended up going second overall to the Chicago Blackhawks, and unfortunately won't be here now as he did sign his deal with the Blackhawks. So we got a little bit lucky with Northern Michigan lost their coach this summer. He took a pro job, and so that allowed us to kind of swoop in and get another foreign guy, this time going Russian instead of Belarusian, and get Vladislav Lukashevich. Really big kid. He's already been drafted to the NHL too. Drafted honestly all the way back in 2021. So he actually will probably not report to his NHL team because he'll probably be here more than the 1 year, but won't be a big kid like Artie, but he'll be maybe even more offensive than Artie was just because he's not playing as a 6'6" guy. I'm trying to think of those are the three that I think, like, if you want to go young forward goalie that you could watch. But honestly, up and down the lineup, there's going to be guys who contribute every night. Like, it's the fourth line is going to probably be all freshmen, but it's going to be talented freshmen. So it's just they can throw waves at you. They're going to roll the lines. They're going to have everyone out there. But those are going to be your headliners for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And those guys, I was bummed to see Artie. I was happy for him to be drafted and get a shot at the pros, but a little selfishly bummed that he left to go to Chicago. I am, to put it lightly, not the biggest Blackhawks fan in the world, so it hurt my heart a little bit to see him get drafted by Chicago, but obviously really happy for Artie. But Vlad, and I'm glad you pronounced his last name because I was going to struggle with that, but Vlad, I was excited we were able to pick him up. He seems to be another solid add in the back end there to help maybe chip in a little bit more offense from the blue line. So that's always good. But yeah, just like you said, I mean, even a couple guys coming back. We have a real good leadership core, I think. And starting with Red Savage being, one of the main leaders on the team and the captain. They another Red Wings pick for those interested in the Red Wings, but he's the senior. Is he the lone senior? I think, yeah. No, there's a couple. Tanner Kelly's too.
Yeah, I'd say Tanner Kelly's up there, and David Gucciardi's. I can't remember if he's a fifth year actually. Honestly, with Gooch,
yes.
But it's just a few seniors, really small class. The portal took most of their class. Not all by the player's choice, but it's gotten down, and like for that, I mean, that shows a lot too that those guys. I mean, Red was a transfer in actually, but like a guy like Tanner, I mean, he had to earn it. Like, I don't think I had him marked down as one that was going to last long under Adam Nightingale, and he bought in, and he's earned everything he's got in that third line with him and Tiernan Shouty and Tony Monisto is probably my favorite line to watch. So, like you said, up and down, it's going to be fun. Yeah,
absolutely. And a couple other players that were well represented in the World Juniors last year, and Tony Monisto and Maxim Strapek. I always pronounce the names wrong.
I think you got that one. Yeah,
okay.
I think you got Max's right. Yeah. And you got Tommy, which is good because everyone will say Tommy, but it's Finnish, so it's Tommy.
Yeah,
But
I always got that Finnish pronunciation, so I knew it was going to be different. It's the last name that throws me for loops, but those two had pretty decent World Junior showings, and they had decent years for MSU last year too. So hopefully they can build on that moving forward and be a bigger part of the production here. So yeah, that's kind of some highlights of the roster. How do you feel, or what's something that you feel like maybe the team needs to improve on from last year? For those of you who don't know, had a Big Ten championship run, did win the conference championship, and had a run in the NCAA tournament. Unfortunately, fell a little bit short, losing to that darn school down the road. So. Just short of going to the Frozen Four, hopefully maybe going a little farther this year. But what's a couple things we need to maybe improve on to get there this year?
I mean, one thing that just is a real problem at the beginning of the season last year, and it just kind of never went away, was they've got to find a way to take less penalties. And it'll show up. Like this weekend, I wouldn't be surprised if there's not a bunch. Like hockey is a sport that, I think you see it a little bit too in football, right? Where they say like, oh, we're going to focus on calling this. We talk to the refs, we really want this called. And at the beginning of the season, it's going to be extra tight. And then it loosens up as you go throughout the season. Hockey has that same problem. So we're only second week of the college season, I would imagine, going to be called pretty tight. But they really just couldn't shake it last year. And it wasn't just you're taking penalties, you're taking a 5-minute major, you're taking, 10-minute misconducts. Like they couldn't quite shake it. And that was something that, like, with all the talent you have, one way you can let another team hang around is to just play shorthanded a bunch. So, you really mess up the flow of your lines. You mess up everything when you're just in the box line. They struggled with that Friday against Lake State. Like they had 9 minutes and penalties in a 20-minute period. So it's you can't be playing like that. So I think that's one thing that they got to continue to work on. They want to play a physical style, but you gotta find a way to like toe the line on that. And then, like, I'm a former defenseman. I'm really tough on all my defensive clients. Like, that's where I harp on guys. I still think the blue line's got to get better. I like who we have, but a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of turnovers last year in bad spots. And so I think that, like, both in recruiting and in just, working with what they've got right now, like, that's something that, like, especially like this weekend, like they're going to be really challenged this weekend with what BC is going to have up front. So just find a way to develop those guys and get a little bit more out of each of them, and continue like in the pipeline, getting maybe a little bit more NHL ready. Like we have a lot of draft picks, but they're mostly up front and in net, right? Like the defense is the one gap. So, finding more of that consistency up and down the lineup. And I think our sophomores are big. Like you mentioned, Maxim Stravic. He's one that I think should have a good year this year. Take a big freshman to sophomore leap. If they can get that out of him and Patrick Geary, they definitely raise their ceiling quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned it. BC will definitely test them. I mean, for those not super into kind of the college hockey scene, I mentioned it. Boston College has a ton of NHL talent. Some players already drafted in the league. Presumably the number 1 overall pick in next year's draft, and James Hagan. He's a true freshman coming in, but he's not going to be in Boston that long. Maybe.
No, he's a show. He's electric to watch, man. Like it's gonna be hard this weekend because you're going against him, but like if you're watching the games this weekend, just enjoy it. That kid is special. He's super talented.
Yes, he is. And they have even more. Ryan Leonard's one of my favorite players of the past few years from the national development team, and another guy who's already been drafted, Gabe Perreault. Players that went through the U.S. developmental team and set records for offensive output there, and that whole team last year. Boston College got that pipeline going and hasn't really let up. So. Unfortunately, that's kind of what you're dealing with this weekend. So lots of talent up and down, and pretty good goaltending too.
Yeah, that was the hard part. most weekends, Trey Augustine's going to pretty clearly win the head-to-head. And so when you get into a weekend where maybe you play a Michigan or a Minnesota and they might have maybe a little bit more talent up front, you can say, like, well, Trey probably beats the goalie at the 200 feet down the rink. Jacob Fowler's like right there with him. So that's kind of the killer, is that this weekend there won't be the huge gap in goaltending. Like Jacob Fowler and Trey have been really two of the top goalies at their age group in America for like their teenage years moving on. So they've played against each other a bunch. They know each other. They've been neck and neck, for a long, long time. And I definitely don't think we should expect like an easy time beating Jacob Fowler this weekend.
Not at all. Emmett, did you wanna add anything?
Honestly, I think you guys mostly hit it. Like, I have not been as huge into the college hockey scene. Like, I always gravitated more towards basketball and football, and kind of slowly found my way back to hockey. Not even when MSU was good, just through actually my brother-in-law, Matt Eichstadt, who's going to be covering the Friday night game. So, yeah.
Shout out to Matt, because he's doing
excited to get to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, so, no, absolutely. And we appreciate guys like Jared coming on. And I just have a couple more questions for you. We won't take up too much of your time, but looking at the schedule, what's outside of this weekend, because that's kind of been the marquee matchup circled for me for forever. And then, of course, we have the usuals, the Great Lakes Invitational, and, the matchups against Michigan that are always nice to watch. But outside of the main ones, what are you looking forward to most this season, as far as like maybe some fun games where people who can tune in and maybe get some exciting hockey out of it if they're not well versed in the Big Ten hockey?
Yeah, I mean, I think Michigan and Minnesota are definitely your league matchups that are going to be the most entertaining. And feature like a ton of offense and everything like that. I think if you're looking for outside of those, like non-conference, this is the one, right? Like non-conference outside of this, it's just tenacious, it's just, and then the GLI and Lindenwood, those aren't going to be, I think, ones that pull people in too much. But I think, honestly, one of the series that might sneak up as like a really important series is the games against Wisconsin. Like when you think about, for me, Michigan, Minnesota, and Michigan State are pretty clearly the top three in the league. Maybe Notre Dame is like the team hovering right beneath them, and Wisconsin's there too. So like for me, Michigan and Minnesota, you're going to trade points. Like no one's going to go 4-0 against each other. You guys are going to kind of beat up on each other. But the series with like a school like Wisconsin is where like you gotta get yourself 3 of the 4 games, or if you can sweep them, that's how you win like a Big Ten title. Like you just do that the whole way, right? So I think that's a big one, and it's also the first Big Ten series. It's the first or second. That's actually not. We play Big Ten in November, but it's they play them in December, and then it's the first series right after the holidays, after GLI, and it features a game at Munn and then a game at Wrigley Field. So I think those are the Wisconsin games. Definitely would be one I would highlight.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who didn't see it, a little self-plug for me. I wrote an article for Shadows talking about the big series or game against Wisconsin at Wrigley. That's going to be a huge event. I'm kind of excited they get to play outside in Chicago, and just after the Winter Classic for the NHL. And you got some good women's hockey games and some other good men's hockey games. So that'll be a fun event for anybody who is in the Chicago area and wants to see some good hockey or make the short trip. That's always an option. That's going to be January 4th, I think it was. So
yeah. And I would say I think on that day is the Ohio State women's team, which is like that's a wagon for sure.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a fun event. Like I'm planning on being down there, but I might try and get down there a little bit early, catch some of the Ohio State women's game too, because they're a fun group to watch for sure.
Yep, absolutely. And so I just wanted one more Michigan State centric question. You kind of touched on recruiting and how we've got some good prospects in the pipeline. And who are some of the guys? And I personally think Adam Nightingale's done a great job recruiting since he's been here and is continuing to do a great job. But What are some of the key, maybe a couple people to watch for in the pipeline that are going to be up and coming soon?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think two guys to keep an eye on this year that could have been in the class this fall, honestly, are Lucas Van Vliet and Austin Baker. Both guys played for the National Team Development Program, and they were like a part of the first. So a big day in college hockey recruiting is August 1st. When you're a rising junior, that's when you can make your verbal commitment and receive offers in college hockey. So August 1st, you always see a big splash of like the top names committing. And before Adam even coached a game here, his very first August 1st offseason, Lucas Van Vliet and Austin Baker were two of the big names to commit to him. So they had a couple good years with the NTDP, but were kind of more depth guys, lower down the lineup. And they weren't going to come in here and get top 6 minutes. So they're playing another season of junior hockey in the USHL. Those are two guys, though, that I think, Lucas Van Vliet, I saw he scored another goal tonight. He's had a hot start. Austin's having a good start, too. That extra year is going to be huge. They're going to come in next year, hopefully just ready to contribute right away and fill in some of what we're losing. Another name that I really like is Riker Lee, who is a guy who I think is playing himself in a pretty high up NHL draft pick. He's playing in Madison in the USHL. He put up 120 points or something insane last year at Shattuck St. Mary's. And he's hit the USHL running. He's not struggling at all with the transition. So definitely one to watch. And those are guys that I think could be here next fall. A lot of the names that get me excited beyond that are probably 2 or 3 years out. So we just got to see how they do adjusting the junior. But I think those 3 guys, and they're all up front, filling guys I would expect Isaac Howard's probably leaving after this year, right? If all things go the way you want it to. Carson Dorwart, probably the same, Red Savage. So you're going to have some big names to fill. You can do a little bit of that through the portal, but we have 3 freshmen that can come in and I think contribute right away to kind of backfill some of that.
Yeah, that'll help. I believe Van Vliet and both of those guys, I think, aren't they? They've already been drafted in the NHL, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah. I know Baker has for sure. I think Van Vliet was a later one too, a 6th or 7th rounder. Kind of late round flyer type guys, but yeah, they should have. I think they both have gone for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And for those who don't know, with hockey, once you're drafted, you have a certain amount of time to sign your entry level deal. And if you don't, your rights expire and you can go a different path. You don't necessarily have to go into the NHL with that team that drafted you. So no guarantee that's where they end up. But it says something that, it's you're already being identified as a potential NHL talent and teams are willing to take a flyer on you already. So those two, I was excited when we got those, and I think those two could be ones to watch for, definitely. My last question, just kind of in general, with college hockey and the CHL in talks to end this feud, I guess I'll call it. How's that? So currently, for those not educated, currently if you play in the Canadian Hockey Leagues, you cannot play college hockey. They, feud, I guess, is the best term. I don't know if you want to describe it a little bit better, but they have not partnered and allowed dual enrollment, I guess, and it's forced some kids to make decisions on whether they want to go play in the Canadian leagues or play college hockey. And for those who don't know, they're in talks to maybe end that and structure some sort of agreement to where you could play a couple years of Canadian hockey, maybe play a couple years of college, however you wanted to do that. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that because I know you probably have some on that, and I was pretty excited.
Yeah, thoughts, and it's keeping me awake. I can tell you it's going to affect our job as hockey advisors a lot too.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, to give a little bit of background, so to kind of explain what it is. So there's 3 leagues in Canada: the OHL, which is the Ontario Hockey League. Think about Saginaw Spirit, Flint Firebirds, Plymouth Whalers back in the day. The QMJHL, which is Quebec's league. Sidney Crosby came from there. It covers Quebec and kind of the eastern part of Canada, the PEI and Nova Scotia and all that, and Newfoundland. and then there's a league out west that covers Western Canada called the WHL. Basically, those leagues are very structured the same as like the USHL, where we get all the MSU players coming from. It's a junior hockey league, 16 to 20 years old. Billet kids, they're moving across the country, very, very similar in all that way. But one thing that was different was that as a CHL player, you could receive a small stipend. It was very small. It was not supposed to be much. There was under the table money. We all know that happened. But on the books, you could get a small stipend. So years ago, they said that basically made you a professional, right? You're getting paid for your services as an athlete, and that made you ineligible to play NCAA hockey. It was always there's been times where people have kind of pushed the envelope. It's a really hard system. I mean, the WHL, they draft kids at 14. Like, no one at 14 should be deciding, do I want to forego my NCAA eligibility? Like, it's a hard decision to make. It had a lot of negative impacts on both sides. Like the CHL teams, if you were in a very big market and you drafted a really talented kid, he could just tell you he's going to go NCAA until you trade his rights. And then the second you trade his rights, he all of a sudden is playing for Sarnia when he wasn't going to show up to Peterborough, right? So it kind of made it tough on both leagues. And once the NCAA allowed NIL, it kind of made it really silly that you could profit off of your NIL, but you can't take a small stipend to play in the OHL when you're 17 and still end up at an NCAA school. So I think it's probably the right decision. Hard to tell what it's going to be. I think, one thing to keep in mind is a lot of these top OHL kids, you can sign your actual NHL deal and then go back to the OHL. Different than NCAA. Like when we mentioned these guys that are drafted to the NCAA, they haven't signed their NHL deal yet. So anyone that does that still can't come to the NCAA because they have signed a pro contract. So those kids will be out, those really top end CHL kids. I think what you'll see is this is a chance if you're a Lake State or Ferris State, to close the gap a little bit. Like the Big Ten schools are pulling further and further apart from you. They're using the portal now. If you're Ferris State and you have a great kid, he might portal out, after 2 years to go to Michigan State or go to Michigan. So it's really, really hard when you're on the G5 of hockey, basically.
Yeah.
So I think you'll see a lot of those schools go in and grab, guys who have used up their eligibility of the OHL. They're turning 21. They can't go back to junior hockey, but they maybe want to get an education and chase the dream a little bit longer. Those would be the type of guys that I think you'll see in the early going, at least. That's going to be a big thing. The other big thing you'll see is we've already seen it a little bit. So Michigan and BU have had commits who were playing in the USHL and in the last 2 weeks have gone back to where they were drafted. So, Zach Morin left Youngstown, went back to the QMJHL, and just today, Noah Kosick left the USHL to go back to the WHL where he was drafted. And both have said they still plan to play NCAA hockey, and that never, before when they did that, you could just say that's basically we lost a decommit right there. So that's going to be a change too. Where these kids play before they get to you is so if you commit a kid at 15 or 16. He may play the OHL instead of the USHL, but your goal is still to get him in at 18, right? That's still your goal if you're an NCAA program. So still a lot that we have to figure out and see how it all comes out. But I think in the end, it's probably good for the game. It makes it easier to get, I think, casual fans interested. I mean, explaining this, I hope I didn't bore everyone here trying to give you the rundown. But, it's just something that if we can get rid of that, it helps get it closer to how basketball recruits, how football recruits, where it's just everyone's open. It's still going to be different. Hockey kids commit at a much younger age than those other sports. It's always going to be, and then they can also come in at 20. They don't have to come in at high school graduation. It's always going to be different. But if we can get rid of one other hurdle, I think it just helps grow the game. I also want to see if randomly we see some Canadian universities jump into this, because I think this kind of is a little bit of the toe in the water. If you're, there's a few Canadian universities that I think have close to NCAA level teams right now, but they're all full of OHL kids because a lot of times that's if you wanted an education after you're out of the OHL, you had a scholarship money to go to a Canadian university. That was part of their collective bargaining, and so I'm kind of interested to see if we see like, Western Ontario jump into the NCAA all of a sudden and have a hockey team. Like that's a way to grow the game too and get more teams, get more scholarships for kids, and that's what I'm hoping is the long term out of this.
Yeah.
But,
well, no, absolutely. And for the kids that maybe realize early on enough that maybe the NHL isn't in their future, why not play hockey a little bit longer and get an education? Try to set yourself up a little bit better. So, I agree. Hopefully, that does some more good than it does. The NIL thing, once that, like you said, once that was passed, it felt like we were just splitting hairs at this point. Like you can come and get all the money in the world through NIL, but you can't get your little monthly stipend from the OHL.
and there was just some really, really dumb NCAA rules like that. You know how it is. Like when that was a rule, there was also just like silly things. Like if you were drafted by an OHL team and you wanted to go to their camp just to see like, hey, I'm going to compare if I come here versus go to the USHL, like which one do I want to do? Even just stepping foot on the ice for like a preseason game in the OHL made you ineligible. And you're like, how do you let kids make a good choice, right? Like they had so many kids who did that and they got to November of their first season in the OHL and they regretted it. They wish they still had their NCAA eligibility, but at that point, you kind of made your bed, you got to lie in it, right? So now I think taking that off the table and allowing people to make a decision closer to 18 rather than 14 is probably a good thing. So,
Right.
it's definitely going to impact the game. It's going to probably mess with parity a little bit, and there's going to be a lot of weird things that come out of it. But I think in the long road, in the long way, I think this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and yeah, you hit it on the head, and hopefully it sees some talent, especially with how young hockey commits and hockey players are scouted, I guess, for lack of a better term, because you can get people signing deals and committing at 14, 15, 16. It's hard to, I mean, all the hockey advisors and all the Jeremys in the world can advise them, but we were all 14 making probably stupid decisions left and right, so.
And I will say too, like one thing I would caution people is don't expect a ton of kids to just all of a sudden commit. One, it's just going to be, I don't think that just because you're 20 in the OHL doesn't mean you're better than a 19-year-old in the USHL. Like there's talent out there. The other thing is, I will say, when you make that decision to go to the OHL at 14, 15, 16, those kids don't quite do the academics the way that, like, if you were preparing for the NCAA, you knew you had to do 4 years of math, 4 years of writing. There's all these, like, particular things you've got to hit. When you're advising OHL players, sometimes when they get to senior year, if they tell you, like, man, I don't want to, like, kill myself at school this year. I'm just going to do what I need to do to graduate Canadian school. They might do that, but that might not be NCAA. So, I wouldn't expect a ton of guys because there's going to be academic hurdles. Like they would have had to been pushing themselves to do things academically that they didn't have to do. So I don't expect a ton of names, but down the road, I think we will see more names.
Oh yeah, perfect. Well, and that's good. That's good things. Hopefully, bright futures are ahead for most of them, and I think it's the good thing in the long run. But yeah, no, we appreciate it, and we appreciate you jumping on with all your expertise. Let everybody know. I wanted to make sure you got time to shout yourself out on what you're doing. So you've got your hand in a lot of things. So let everybody know what you're doing today.
Also, easiest way to find me is on Twitter at jerbear_JD. I always look that up. Is it JD_Jerbear? Oh my God, this is bad. You can tell I'm not good at selling myself here. But also I do write for Spartans Illustrated, the Rivals MSU site. So you can I encourage people to come out there, see my writing there, and I'll share that on Twitter all the time. But live tweet games, love to interact with people, and like I said, love to jump on shows like yours and talk some puck. Hopefully it's fun to do this on the front end this year. I did a lot last year as they got going, so hopefully it's fun to see the excitement preseason now, and hopefully they keep it going through the whole season, and then keep it relevant.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we appreciate you joining. I'll hit you one last quick bonus question just for my fandom.
Yeah.
Percentage Trey Augustine plays one more year as a Spartan next year. I have it at about 1.5%. What do you got?
Definitely higher than that. I will say it's higher than that. It's a tough one. Goalies are so tough, man. Like, goalies are a really unique breed. It's like a quarterback, like in many ways it's like a quarterback, but also just in the fact that you only, like, through your whole pro system have about 6 goalies, right? Like double A, triple A, and then your NHL team. So, and you really don't want to bring a goalie up too early and have them riding the bus in the East Coast League if that's just going to kill their confidence. Like, being a student at MSU and having all the practice you have and all the people taking care of your nutrition, people taking care of your wait time, like, when you're a pro in the East Coast League or the AHL, I used to work for the Griffins. I worked in the AHL a lot. Man, it is not easy at 19 watching these guys try and, like, be their entire adult, right?
Yeah.
So, and there's no one to babysit them. It's not the same as their college program, right? Like, the lot falls on them all of a sudden. So it's tough. I go back and forth. Like, I think it's higher than the 1.5%, but I don't know if it's greater than 50.
Yeah.
It really depends. Probably maybe, do they find a goalie who they think, there's a couple in the system that I know the Red Wings like to be like a battery mate with Trey if they could draw it out. But it kind of depends. Like, basically, I don't think they would bring Trey in unless it's pretty certain he would be in Grand Rapids. So
That's what.
seeing how the Griffins net goes this year and in relation to the Red Wings net kind of could tell a lot. But I really don't see any reason to sign him and send him to Toledo. That doesn't make sense to me, to burn a year on his entry level in Toledo. So I'd probably put it at like 35 to 40% chance that he's back. I mean, if you try to read the tea leaves on at least the recruiting side of things, they definitely haven't rushed to get a goalie to replace Trey. Like, they have no goalies committed. They have the 2 goalies on the roster, and they have no goalies committed. Now, you can always go to the portal, just like a quarterback. You can go to the portal for a goalie if you're Michigan State. But, at this point, they certainly don't seem in a rush to feel like Trey's gone. And I know I got a lot of questions this summer. There are reports that 4 guys turned down NHL deals. Trey was not one of them. He did not have an NHL deal to go. No way. Detroit is very happy with where he's at. He's close. They trust the coaching he's getting here. One of the assistant coaches on staff is a goalie himself, and Jared DeMichael. So they're very, very happy with where he is, and no rush to get him out of the situation. So, I'd say like 35, 40%, and it's probably going to fluctuate, but that's where I'm at, at this point in the season.
Yeah. No, well, that's good. You're a little more optimistic than I am, but the same with.
I think Red Wings fans just really want him in Detroit. So
I do.
I caution you, man. 19-year-old goalies. It's rough, man. And he's been great. Like, the kid is so mature. He is one of the coolest customers I've ever seen. Like, he's a very, very mature kid, but you know how everyone brings up the Peyton Manning threw a ton of interceptions his rookie season. If you go back, everyone loves Marc-Andre Fleury now. Go look at Marc-Andre Fleury's rookie stats when he was really, really young, and the Penguins brought him way quicker than they should have because they were so terrible. He got absolutely lit up, and they thought they ruined their top draft pick because he just got shelled for a year. He had the David Carr getting sacked a million times syndrome. It was bad. And he pulled up out of it, and he made his career. But you got to be very careful with your goalies. And so I would be optimistic that he can come back for a junior year. But if he lights it up this year and accomplishes all that he could accomplish, maybe he's gone. So don't hold me to it if he is gone. But at least if you're a Red Wings fan, you get a little bit it's a lot easier to swallow than Artie going to the Blackhawks. I will say that. So
absolutely. And you don't. I agree. You don't want to send him to Toledo because very little defense gets played in the East Coast League, and that's just not great either. But I think it's more for me. I think
You're sleeping in
Yeah.
the Ramada. It's not, Red Roof Inn, the
Yep.
Red Roof Inn in Kansas City. Like, no, it's not
Yeah.
a fun life. The coast provides great podcasts from guys that are like 31 and love to drink. It's not great for your 19-year-old goalies, that's for sure.
Right, absolutely. So yeah, for me, it's more. I think Costa's going to be put up next year. Hopefully, as a Red Wings fan, I think it's Costa's time to maybe get some game action. If that's the case, what the heck are we going to do in Grand Rapids? But yeah, we'll see.
Sebastian's good too. I like him. So
Yes. So, well, I appreciate it. I won't take any more of your time. We got some Tigers last minute rooting to do. So I appreciate you hopping on with us, and hopefully we can do this again. And I will talk hockey any day of the week. So, me, that's not a problem.
sounds good, boys. Good luck to your Tigers tonight.
Season.
Yes, thank you. Emmett, appreciate you hopping on too. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week with our regular football previews and some basketball stuff. But there's your hockey primer. Again, thanks, Jer, for joining us, and go green.
Go White.